1.
Good evening. I'm Bernard Green, and this is the meeting, a special meeting of the Brookline Select Board for November 4, 2024, one day before Election Day. And I hope everyone has either already voted or is planning and has a good plan to vote tomorrow. Vote as if your life depended on it. I'm not going to make any comment as whether it does, but okay, so let's start out with comments or updates from the select board. Anyone have any?
I have one that's
Yeah.
apropos to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
I ran into passed by our esteemed town clerk on my way into the building, and he gave me a news flash, which is that 40% of registered voters have voted, which is pretty darn good, but it does mean that 60% of registered voters haven't yet voted. And in case people are wondering, the number there is 17,000. 17,000 votes have already been cast in Brookline. So just echoing what our chair said, tomorrow is the big day for those who haven't yet voted, and that includes me. So I'm going to be heading out to Runkle School to vote. The other thing I just want to mention, and it occurred to me as I was driving here tonight, as we all know, I hope everybody has figured this out. It's we had daylight savings time, the adjustment of our clocks on Sunday, and what that means for people driving to a destination at 5:30 that happens to take them through the streets of Brookline, is that it's as dark as as night gets already at 5:30. And I think that takes a little getting used to. And I think it's equally true of pedestrians and of motorists, that driving in the dark of night is an experience that requires even more attention, even more caution. I could sort of feel the nervousness that it brings on, that you've got to be really, really focused on every single intersection, every single crosswalk, every single person who might be riding a bike in the street, every person who's a pedestrian who might suddenly decide to cross the street. We want Brookline to be, as they say when they talk about Vision Zero, a town where we just don't experience tragedies involving cars, pedestrians, bicyclists, et cetera. But after the change of the clocks in connection with daylight savings time, suddenly driving requires a lot more, driving and biking and walking as well, a lot more attention to the usual, measures of care that we take. So I just thought I would mention that because it was certainly impressed on me when I drove over here tonight. Lots of people out and, lots of situations where you really have to be paying attention.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions or updates?
Okay.
No? Okay. Okay, let's move on to public comment. Now, I understand that there's an amendment to warrant Article 18 concerning rodenticides that has been proposed by the Advisory Council on Public Health. Since we've already had our hearing, I don't want to reopen a hearing on this article. Rather, the select board later on will discuss and vote based on what we know. But Charlie Homer, who's, I think he's chair of the advisory committee.
Yeah.
Asked for time to present the ACPH amendment, which I will allow, but not during the discussion of the warrant article, but during public comment. Unfortunately, he's not here. But I'm going to take other public comment, and if and when he speaks, I'll let him speak and then give one of the petitioners for warrant article 18. I think Jocelyn Murphy wants to speak, an opportunity to respond. So let's start off with our regular public comment and see if anyone else wants to speak.
Yes, the first speaker is Linda Pelkey. Linda, I'm promoting you now. Linda, you can start your video and begin your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Linda Olson Pelkey, a town meeting member, Precinct 17, Advisory Committee, Land Use Subcommittee, and the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. I'm speaking to you tonight to encourage the Select Board to vote favorable action on the Banca Blood substitute motion for Article 15 on accessory dwelling units. While I'm speaking for myself, I will say that discussions at both the Advisory Subcommittee and among the Brookline by Design Steering Committee show me that issues around needing adequate setbacks and concerns around privacy and open space are all very important issues in the context of by right ADUs. And support for any new ADU regulation will likely hinge on these topics. I want to thank Dick Benka and Roger Blood for addressing these concerns in their proposal and for all of their work seeking a compromise. We did spend time in subcommittee discussing with First Assistant Town Council the issues around what constitutes reasonable regulation that the law does allow us to insert in these bylaws. And I understand from Mr. Banka's memo that there are no issues as far as Town Council is concerned around the reasonableness of the regulations in the substitute motion. We should also be aware that the ADU by right provisions will apply to any single family dwelling unit, regardless of which zoning district it is located in. That means that single family homes in, say, a 2-family district could be located on very small lots, making very little space remaining for a possible ADU. Therefore, the issue, excuse me, of minimum setbacks for by right ADUs is even more impactful in these other zones. Because this zoning amendment would require a 2/3 vote at town meeting, I strongly recommend that the Select Board support the Banca Blood substitute motion, which is much more likely to be supported by the AC and Brookline by Design and could therefore be the difference in garnering the required 2/3 vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda.
Before you go on, so we're going to be hearing a presentation by Roger Blood and Dick Benka, and then a response by the planning department later on when warrant Article 15 comes up. That's sort of outside the normal way that we do things, but it's because the Select Board directed the parties to get together and try to work out a compromise. So it's a little different from other situations because of that. I just want to make that clear. I'm not going to hold Dick and Roger to any limitation based on Linda Pelkey's presentation, but just want to let you know that that is how we're going to do this.
Thank you, Bernard. Also, I realized I skipped reading the rules, so I'll go ahead and do
We
so.
notice.
Yes, thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes has been met, there's an opportunity at the conclusion of the Select Board's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Okay, the next speaker is Dr. Homer, who's online. Dr. Homer, I'm promoting you now. You can start your video and begin your 3 minutes regarding warrant Article 18.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Select Board. So my name is Charles Homer. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 8. In addition, I have the honor of serving as chair of the Advisory Council on Public Health. I'm going to make just some brief comments. You should have materials from us concerning our proposed amendment for warrant Article 18. ACPH had the great pleasure of hearing the petitioner, Jocelyn Murphy, and reviewed all the materials in great detail. ACPH firmly confirmed and agreed with the concerns that the petitioner raised concerning the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. We agree that this presents a hazard to wildlife and in addition potentially hazards to children. So we concurred with the desire for there to be stricter regulation and really have no disagreement whatsoever about the concerns and the issues that were raised by Audubon and others concerning the potential harm associated with these rodenticides. We do firmly support, however, or in addition, the integrated control, which is used by the town as part of our rodent control action plan to address issues of rats and other rodents in our community, which primarily includes addressing the food sources, but also includes a variety of other efforts. Rodenticides are a very minor part of that effort, but they are considered to be something that could be used in the event of emergencies. Our main concern really related to whether this is best addressed by a home rule petition, and the specific home rule petition calls for the ability of the town to implement its own regulation of rodenticides rather than a different vehicle, a resolution calling upon our state representatives, both Senator Cream, Representative Vitolo, and the other representatives of our community, to express our concern to support existing legislation or legislation likely to be proposed. We think it's quite different than other efforts where the town has requested its own ability to regulate because we had relationships with, for example, restaurants, food establishments, and others for the other areas that we choose to regulate. This is an area where, in fact, by the petitioner's own words, we do not want the ability to regulate. We want the state to regulate. We thought if we want the state to regulate, we should ask for what we want. So that was our rationale. Just a different vehicle to get to the same end. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later on in the discussion when you review this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Homewood.
And next, we're going to hear from Jocelyn. Yes, you may.
Do you still need a slide?
Yes, please. The benefit of the audience.
We will stipulate that owls are wonderful animals.
Good evening. Jocelyn Murphy, Town Meeting Member from Precinct 16. This is a barred owl that was recently taken to Tufts by Brookline's animal control officer. The owl died of suspected anticoagulant rodenticide poisoning soon afterward. The ACPH motion is premised on 4 main assertions. They assert that because eschars cause immense prolonged suffering and death among natural rodent predators, and because they harm domestic pets and children, they should be curtailed. We agree. They assert that adherence to community-wide integrated pest management that prohibits or greatly restricts the use of eschars can successfully control rodents. We agree. They assert that a policy prohibiting the use of eschars on public property in Brookline has been adopted. We agree, adding that like Article 18, the policy was citizen petitioned. Finally, they assert that pest control operator licensing and regulation of eschars is performed at the state level. We agree. It is because of these assertions that a home rule petition rather than a resolution that simply punts this back to the state is necessary. Although we can see the black bait boxes housing rat poison throughout the town, we don't have sufficient data on the frequency or location of eschar boxes used by private pest control operators. The bylaw contemplated under Article 18 could solve that. We disagree that establishing a regulatory framework to control the private use of eschars would require significant town resources. The town has bylaws that have reduced the use of trans fats, plastic bags, and unsustainable containers. These bylaws have not required significant town resources, and yet they have achieved the goal of reducing the consumer use of these products. In any event, statewide legislation would likely confer enforcement authority on local authorities. The ACPH concluded that statewide action rather than local regulation is the best way to reduce the harm caused by eschars. To date, the state, including the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources and the state legislature, has failed to take any meaningful action toward controlling the indiscriminate use of eschars in Massachusetts. And by our inaction, we are allowing the immense, prolonged suffering and death of wildlife in Brookline, like the suffering that was endured by this barred owl. Local
You have 30
action
seconds.
is needed because our wildlife, nature's most efficient rodent predators, cannot wait. Please continue to join a unanimous advisory committee, Mass Audubon, the MSPCA, the Sierra Club, the Charles River Watershed Association, the Brookline Bird Club, Senator Cindy Cream, Representative Ruth Balzer, and Representative Bill McGregor in supporting the home rule petition that is called for in Warrant Article 18. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elisa Plazanja.
Okay, I'm not sure that we should have a hearing
I was just,
right now.
It's public comment, no?
public comment.
Right. but
Oh, I
we-
guess it-
If everyone, if there are a lot of people going to speak on the same warrant article, it's like having a hearing. So it goes against what we're trying to do. But why don't you go ahead?
Good evening, Elisa Plazanja, Precinct 8. And I'd like to comment on warrant Article 18. And my only observation is that the format of this warrant article is supported as a home rule petition, is supported by our Senator Cynthia Cream. So she must believe that it's an effective vehicle for trying to prompt the state into action. And I wonder then why people would question that. But I'm really here to comment on warrant Article 16, which is just wanted to point out one item on funding. And I know that I sent you a letter that I hope you had time to read over the weekend or today regarding finding funding to support the administration of the warrant article. If you look at Appendix C of the Urban Forest Climate Resiliency, Urban Forest Climate Resiliency Master Plan, there is in there a memo from the Moderators Committee from town meeting of May of 2003 that recommended enacting a tree preservation bylaw. And the contents of that tree preservation bylaw were substantially stricter than the warrant article that we currently have. That was 21 years ago. However, the committee noted that at the time, the town did not have the funding to support the personnel required to administer such a bylaw. So 21 years later, I'm wondering whether the town is really serious about supporting tree preservation if over more than 2 decades, we're not able to find the source of funding for that article, especially when the Urban Forest Climate Resiliency Master Plan offers many different suggestions for finding funding. So I hope that we can reach the point where we stop passing this on to future generations. And I appreciate that there's been turnover among town government, but I hope that all of you will have the courage to dig in and find the funding for once and for all so that we can protect our tree canopy. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers who signed up in advance. Is there anyone in the room or online who wishes to speak during public comment? If so, please raise your hand using the raise the hand feature. Fran Perler.
Hi, I'm not going to speak on any of the warrant articles I'm associated with,
Thank you.
Bernard. I just wanted to make a comment that I've seen in Paul and John's emails that the big development in Chestnut Hill that's being brought down to a smaller size is cutting 115 senior housing units. And I just urge the select board and the negotiators in the town to try to convince them that senior housing is really important and we need as much of it as we can. Thank you.
I wonder if I could help with that.
Sure.
The developer made a change between their initial proposal and the current one that resulted in a reduction of density. They, among other things, they brought the highest point down from 20 stories proposed to 16 stories proposed. And that still has not been settled by any means. There's probably an iteration number 3 in the works. The units that were cut out, what they did was change the housing for seniors from an assisted living facility or an independent and plus assisted living plus memory care to over 55. So they're changing the whole structure, whole nature of what they're planning to offer. And I'm not sure whether people realize that that drop in the number of units reflects a change from a significant change of use and a significant change in the kind of unit that will be offered.
Thank you.
And did you wish to speak as well? I'm sorry, I can't recall your name. If you could please state your name.
My name is Kathy Jansen. I'm from Precinct 11. And I just wanted to quickly say in regard to warrant Article 18 that there are many, many advocates across the state who have been in this business for decades longer than I have, who I think know way better than we. And they have proposed that every town and city in Massachusetts that we can convince to get a home rule article, and Audubon is working on Boston as we speak to try and get as many home rule petitions passed so that we can put pressure on the state, both to get the state to make a move, which they haven't done, even with years and years of fighting about this. And also, it would give us the ability, if the state doesn't move, to at least make some impact on the SCAR use. It's a small impact in our small little town, but if we took the amount of SCARs off the map that are being used now in Brookline and Newton and Arlington and Newbury alone, many, many, many more birds of prey would live, and many pets would not have high vet bills and die. It would make a difference, not as big a difference as a state law, but our fear is that a resolution will be ignored in the same way that they've ignored 5 years of the Sierra Club fighting the state to make a move on this, 5 years of Audubon fighting with the state to do this. They've also fought on the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our time for public comment at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, next, miscellaneous calendar, approval of miscellaneous items, licenses, and contracts. So we don't have minutes today, so we'll move on. Question of approving a community event request for First Light from the Brookline Chamber of Commerce, contingent upon approval from and appropriate coordination with key town departments such as Brookline Public Schools, Department of Public Works, and Police. Any questions regarding that? Anything you want to add?
We're looking forward to it.
Yep. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, question of approving an authorization to hire request from the Director of Health and Human Services for the following position, a Regional Tobacco Control Coordinator. Any questions regarding that or any additional information? No? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next, our main calendar items for the agenda. Updates on previously referred town meeting warrant articles. Chaz, you're gonna.
Sure. So
Okay.
in your packet, apologies for the late breaking nature of it, are two brief reports, draft reports for your review and comment and potential approval to go in the combined reports. Two warrant articles from the annual 2023 town meeting of May were referred to the select board, specifically warrant article 17 about cannabis equity and warrant article 19 about the creation of a Black and Brown Commission. The reports summarize the activity that we have taken in response to the follow-up that you directed us to take, specifically the question of how the then new Cannabis Control Commission regulations impacted our social equity policies. You had actually already updated your social equity policy in response to community input. And you did that after warrant article 17 was filed, but before it came to town meeting. So as of now, only social equity applications, or sorry, only applications from institutions that the CCC has certified as coming from a disadvantaged community. There are two different classes of certification there. Will be accepted for retail cannabis licenses in Brookline from now until 2026. But the law and the regulations do not require us to affirmatively create new licenses, which was the question that came up at town meeting. So this report answers that question. On warrant article 19, we summarized the work that was done, that is still ongoing. One with regard to the restorative justice work with Professor Susan Mays Rothstein at the Center for Restorative Justice at Suffolk University. Talks a bit about the investigation of the contentious debate surrounding warrant article 19 and the language that was used there. Ultimately, there were no findings of violation of the town's diversity bylaw, but there are still open questions there. So those efforts are ongoing in some respects. And then there's just a summary of some of the work that has been ongoing since warrant article 19 came to town meeting regarding the work that is ongoing and the efforts that are still the strides that are still being made to make Brookline a more equitable and fair place to live. While we acknowledge particularly that those efforts require the buy-in and the support from the communities that they're meant to help. And that is an important part of this that we are also working towards. It's not just we have these great programs, here they are, take advantage of them. It's making sure people feel that the government is something that can be trusted and something that where the support is genuine. So it's not just creating the programs, it's reaching people where they are and trying to build those connections, which is part of what the restorative justice work intends to do too. So those are your two brief updates. If you have any comments or thoughts on the language, I would welcome them.
Do we need to approve the report or
You do.
favorable action
Yeah.
on this warrant article?
You can approve the reports. It's not, it's a warrant
Oh.
article. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's not a warrant, it's just a report.
Yeah,
So I have two questions. Thank you, Chaz, for providing the reports. My questions relate to the referral of Article 19. And there seem to be two aspects to the referral. One was the very contentious, divisive nature of, I think, leading up to the debate and the debate that caused quite a bit of division. And my sense is the restorative justice process was part of trying to help with that healing.
right.
And then the second thing is the key question, which was the subject matter of Article 19, which was the creation of a Black and Brown Commission.
Right.
We don't really mention at some point, will we have the discussion about whether we need to bring back that Black and Brown Commission, or is it already incorporated into other boards and commissions? How are we going to address that question?
It's my hope, and I stress that, the restorative justice process is being run independently. I don't have control over that process, and that's by design. We really want someone independent to be in charge of this, who could be a trusted voice. So it's not me, it's not the board. We are asking Suffolk to be an independent actor here. It's my hope that out of those conversations will come back something, whether that's a renewed warrant article for a commission, whether that's a discussion of how to revise CDICR in some way to make it more responsive. I don't know what the framework of that will look like, but I think it will come out of those conversations where there's meaningful dialogue about what's missing. Where is the dialogue deficient? Where are we not reaching people who are members of marginalized communities, and what can be done to correct that?
Mike,
What are we getting, what do we know of the conversations that the folks from Suffolk are having with the people who, the petitioners for warrant article 19 in the first place?
I have not received a report yet from Professor Mays Rothstein on that, and I will follow up with her. I know the initial conversations have just begun, so I think I want to hear from her, but I want to hear from her when she's ready to give that update. So my hope is that that's coming sooner rather than later, since I know she's had initial meetings with members of the select board and other members of the community. So we should have updates from her shortly.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess one follow-up, and thanks for answering Mike's follow-up question, is very helpful. Maybe if we could make a tweak to the report that speaks to this issue about how we're getting at the question of addressing the petitioner's original request, which was the formation of a commission.
So language like I'm sorry.
yeah. think how Chaz described that is as a result of the restorative.
I agree. It's
justice
just not,
process.
it's not written that way in the report. I agree with what he answered. If he could incorporate that
I
into the
can, I,
report.
I can,
that'd
I
be
can put that,
perfect.
I can put that sentence at the end of that paragraph. So, it's the hope of the select board that at the end of this process, we'll have the information
direction.
necessary to come back to the town.
Perfect, perfect.
But without committing to any specific.
No, it has to come out of the process.
Right.
Okay, so unless there are any other questions,
that's good.
I'll vote to approve warrant article 21.
As amended.
As amended, which is a warrant article because that's where we put reports of various committees and other bodies in the combined reports. So all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Okay, let's get into the fun part of our meeting. Starting off with warrant article 18. And I see Melissa's coming to the podium. to sort of
I have
inform us where
scorecards
we
for
are.
all of the articles. I can help walk you through, but there are, staff also that can give you more of an update than I can. For Article 18, you discussed earlier tonight, the board's current position is favorable action. Advisory's current position is favorable action also. We had a late-breaking resolution filed by the Advisory Council on Public Health, which you heard from the chair and the petitioner in response. So that's kind of where we are with Article 18.
Okay, any discussion? I think last time we voted or discussed, and there seemed to be agreement that we would favor favorable action on the original version of the warrant article. Is there any?
Did we already
change or-
vote? Did we already vote?
You
No.
did, did you,
Oh,
you did already vote, yes. So you.
We voted.
We already
so we'd
voted.
have- So we would have to reconsider.
You'd have to reconsider that vote
Okay.
if you, and so if
Um,
you're satisfied with where you are, you don't need to do anything.
I apologize. My notes are sort of jumbled here. Okay, any desire to reconsider? No?
No, it's kind of, it's a bit concerning to ignore the advisory council, but just the same, I think, listening to the whole of the commentary that's been made on this, I'd like to go with what we originally voted.
Okay, so our vote for favorable action on the original version of the warrant article stands.
Do we need to, do we need to vote on the other? We don't need to. Okay.
Yeah, the agenda says possible votes, so. Okay, so let's make sure that we identify which ones we've already voted on. Warrant Article 16, amend 8.41 of the town general bylaws to expand the requirements of the tree preservation bylaw.
So Article 16, when we met last week, we were waiting for the advisory committee to do some amendments. They've since done that. They voted favorable action 18 to 1 to 4 on the article as amended. And since the petitioner is here, it would be helpful if she could outline what the advisory committee did to the article, because I don't have anything from them describing those changes.
And also, it would be also helpful to know if you support and agree with the advisory committee's version.
Sure. So there were two changes that we made in response to our meeting with the advisory committee. One was to add an additional exemption for the removal of trees when the trees on the lot are getting crowded. So if the removal of a tree is deemed to be for the benefit of the remaining trees on the lot, then there would be no mitigation required because it's being done for the overall benefit of the tree canopy on that lot. And the other exemption that we added, which was one that was implied by state law, but we had a request to make it explicit, was for in the case when trees are removed because the property owner is installing a solar energy system. And so there's mass law that prevents interference with the installation of solar energy systems. And that just kind of codified it in the bylaw that if you're taking out a tree because you're putting in solar, that you would be exempt from any mitigation requirements under the bylaw. So it was only those two changes.
And did you say you support? I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, raise your hand, please. Okay, you support that. Okay. Any, great, David?
Just the first change that you mentioned, who would be making the determination as to whether the removal of the tree is for the betterment of the entire canopy on the parcel?
That would be a certified arborist.
And it would be a certified arborist who's selected by the homeowner, by the town, by whom?
It would be typically the property owner. And that is a service that the larger tree removal companies will provide. If you ultimately use them to remove the tree, then they won't charge for the arborist certification.
Thank you.
So Tom Brady doesn't have a role in that?
I'm sorry?
Does Tom Brady, our arborist, have a role in that?
So I'm not sure if he's on the call, if he could answer that. Whether he might at certain times disagree with the position of a homeowner or a certified arborist. I would imagine that there's room for interpretation and that there might be a conversation, but the bylaw as written only requires that if you have that certification, then you are exempt. And that's similar to other exemptions that are provided for trees that are dead or dying or unviable and so on. And I would note that both the cities of Newton and Cambridge have similar exemptions from their tree ordinances.
Paul?
Yeah, so I had a quick question and then a comment. So do we know the cost for an arborist to come out and, do an assessment and generate a report?
So if you are, we contacted a number of the larger tree removal services, and if they come out and they're assessing the situation, there were sort of two of the larger ones. One said if you hire them to do the work afterwards, they would not charge. And the other just provided the report as part of their proposal with no charge. There are other companies that do charge us a fee that's usually based on an hourly rate, but it is possible if you shop around to obtain that certification at no additional cost beyond the cost of having the tree taken down.
John?
I have a number of questions, and I don't want to take more than my share of the time, but I'll start with just a couple, and then if others have questions, I'd like to sort of come back with a couple. The first one is just sort of basic and procedural. Do we have in our packet this latest version of the
Yes.
Amended? And what is the document in the packet that is that?
So 6A, WA 16 tree preservation AC amendments is the red line version of this.
Is the red line version of it?
Yes.
And no further changes? I thought maybe I heard reference to.
It's on page
difference.
109, more or less,
Yeah.
back and forth around page
Well,
1.
I'm using the other form of I've got it. 6A, Warrant Article 16, tree preservation AC amendment with AC amendments.
Yep.
And if anyone would like to read them, I mean, if anyone reads that right now, they will notice that, as has been the case, there's been a lot of hard work done on this article as originally presented some weeks ago. And every time there is work done on it, certain stuff gets crossed out, certain stuff gets added. And I find it, difficult on this kind of a notice to figure out whether everything has been covered with all of the changes, the crossouts and the additions, and the various concerns that were raised along the way as this worked its way through the process. I have a second question, which is this the version that was in front of the tree planting committee and the Conservation Commission when they met last week? And in neither case did they vote a endorsement of the article. They voted to essentially issue a report on their discussion of the article, as I understand it. And if anybody wants to disagree with me on that interpretation of their meetings, please feel free to do so. But is this the version that they met, had discussions, and decided that they weren't comfortable enough to endorse it, but they would write a report to explain their reservations? Fran, you might know. You were at, I think, maybe both
I mean,
meetings.
I was at those meetings.
Okay.
So, I believe that they had the latest copy. So that, the document that you have, the 6A with AC amendments,
Yeah,
that was provided to the advisory committee.
right.
And the, Conservation Commission and the Tree Planting Committee met afterwards. So they should have had the latest version.
And yet did not see fit to, they felt there were enough concerns that they didn't vote to endorse the article.
May I comment on that?
Well, yeah, I'm just
I'll-
trying to get some clarification on
Yeah.
things.
So there was a lot of discussion in both meetings about whether, first of all, whether it was even in their purview. There were some comments about questioning why they weren't involved in the process earlier, even though we did contact them as soon as the article was filed and reached out and asked them if they wanted to meet with us and to review everything. And when we asked them to articulate what their concerns were, to see if we could try to address them through an amendment, they were unable to articulate anything concrete. It was just a, sort of nebulous concern that there might be unintended consequences or that this wasn't targeted sufficiently, et cetera, which was very different from the other committees with whom we met that had very specific feedback and we were able to respond to it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that is a, perhaps a fair summation, but this is the Tree Planting Committee and this is the Conservation Commission, and neither one felt ready to support it. I think because, as you said, it's been a process where a lot of changes have been made and then changes to the changes and then changes to the changes. And I think people are having a hard time figuring out where are we with this, because at first it raised a lot of concerns. Have all of those concerns been addressed, including the concern as to the impact it would have, on staff and the need to actually add staff at a time when we're not sure that there's going to be room in the budget to add staff?
So almost all of the concerns that were raised during our review with the AC subcommittee and later with the AC, and we also had met with the planning board and were able to make amendments to respond to their concerns. Those are all in there. There are other documents, one of which I provided to you, which is a restated warrant article that has a summary of all of the changes made and the reasons therefore. And that was also in the letter that I sent you. So I would be happy to answer any questions on top of that. As far as the tree planting committee is concerned, their purview is to plant trees on public land. Our warrant article focuses on tree removal on private property. So I'm not sure what overlap there is there and the perspective that they would be bringing to reviewing the warrant article. So that's just a question that I have. Similarly, the Conservation Commission seemed to be, unsure about, they, at least in my opinion, seem to be waffling back and forth between thinking that this would somehow, that people want to keep their trees, and so there really isn't a need for this warrant article, but then that this warrant article might actually cause people to remove trees. So in the absence of their letter, which they have not yet issued, it's unclear to me what their thinking is. And in fact, I don't even know if they voted yet. They just voted to write a letter. So we don't know what its contents are going to be and what the advice that they're going to offer will be.
Okay. I'll stop for the time being with this next question. Is the concern that was raised by our town council, and I'm glad that he's here, has that been addressed to the satisfaction of the town council, that this does not raise constitutional issues as to property? So I think maybe we're going to have to hear from Joe on that. Is that okay, Mr.?
And did you see our response in the letter that we wrote to you? There's a detail section that
Well,
provides.
yeah, but it
presents
might be
two
good to
different
find out if
yep.
he still has concerns. But I have seen your letter, so thanks.
Joe Callahan, Town Council. Sorry. My concerns have not been addressed. I've seen the response. I addressed this at AC in their last meeting. The evidence that's provided for the rough proportionality does not demonstrate rough proportionality. It demonstrates that we don't have a consistent position on what proportionality is. So if I were to have to defend this, I would have the record demonstrating that it is not roughly proportional. There is one graphic that shows it may be. There are two other studies that show it isn't. So I would have a mixed record when I'm supposed to be showing that it is roughly proportional. And I'd have to show not just that there's some evidence of rough proportionality, that by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more than 50-50, that is roughly proportional. And in constitutional analysis, this is what's called heightened scrutiny. So it's not just anything can go. It's not as high as strict scrutiny. It's not as low as rational basis. It's heightened scrutiny. So I'd need lots of evidence. And actually, I have lots of evidence that it isn't.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were putting your
Just,
hand up.
just
David.
getting ready to speak in the future.
I have a question for the petitioner again. So section 5.4 on permit issuance, specifically sections D and E. I see that the word excavation was removed. And I recall that excavation was removed because of a concern that Select Board Member Warren mentioned, which I agree with, which was the issue about, well, if I'm clearing out a bush and my quote unquote excavation is 1.5 feet, is that really intended to invoke this bylaw? And the answer to that was essentially no, which is why that term was removed. But my question is, what if the excavation is for the purpose of putting in a new foundation? Would that be covered by the word construction? Because an excavation for purposes of a new foundation is presumably a lot deeper than
Right,
removing a
and so
bush.
I think that would really be a question for the building department, but my assumption is that it would be, because if you're building for a new foundation, you would need an overall building permit. And then that, and therefore that would invoke the warrant article. At least that's my supposition, but I won't pretend to be.
All right, could maybe town council address that question about the meaning of construction?
And also, would that cover excavation to fix a ruptured water line? I've had that problem.
Wait, you have to be at the microphone to speak. Sorry.
Do you want your question answered, or do you want me to answer?
Well, the question I had, well,
Yes.
I guess both, but essentially, what is the meaning of construction? Would that encompass excavations that are larger scale? So not what Paul Warren had been talking about previously, about removing a bush and a few inches or a foot, but where it's a significant excavation for putting in a foundation, or as Chair Green stated, for repairing a water line.
Unfortunately, I'd rather, Joe Callahan, Town Council, unfortunately, I'd rather the building commissioner answer that question, because it's more about the building code than it is about our bylaws, since we don't have a definition of what's the commencement of construction. But I'm sure there is a definition of the building code, but Dan would know that better than I would.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
The current trigger in the bylaw is construction that alters the footprint of a building. And so in the example of excavation for a water line, that would not be covered.
Okay, there is a definition in the bylaw for excavation.
That has been, excavation has been removed if you're looking at the later, the most recent
Okay.
version. Yeah, so that was in the original Warren article, and I think as Mr. Perlman mentioned, we were having a trouble with wording it in a way that it would really go after what we were trying to target, which is excavation that could be harmful to the critical root zone of a tree that was not intended for removal. And so it was really hard to do that without also pulling in things that were pretty innocuous. And so we just pulled it out entirely, sort of under the supposition of what Mr. Perlman actually said, that the more significant excavation would typically be accompanied by construction and that we'd pick it up that way.
Paul,
And this, my question maybe can only be answered by the building commissioner. So I too, I think I raised this with one of the petitioners about the word construction. And, you know, when I see how closely excavation is related to construction, so excavation or construction, if, you know, I gave a couple of examples about if you need to reinstall your walkway, which is an existing walkway, and you need to pull it up and lay down bricks, or you have a driveway that needs to be repaved, or you have an existing attached deck, uncovered deck on your property. I believe each one of those construction activities would require a building permit to do that. And would that building permit, because it is construction, trigger the requirement to have an arborist if that walkway, driveway, or deck is within the distance to a tree?
Yeah, so the trigger isn't applying for a building permit. The trigger is construction activity that alters the footprint of a building. So something like replacing your driveway or a walkway or even the steps or your front porch would not be altering the footprint of the building, and therefore the tree preservation bylaw would not be triggered. It was only triggered if you're altering the footprint of the building. And incidentally, this is consistent with the trigger from the original bylaw that was recommended by the Moderators Committee back in May of 2003, had a similar trigger of construction that alters the footprint of a building.
One follow-up question. So just because I want to make sure I'm perfectly clear on
I'm
this.
not
So-
sitting down.
No, okay, great. Don't sit. So where it says, I lost it, tree protection and mitigation plan, which is item D under 5.4, which David Perlman had raised. That's where it's specifically saying in the event of a planned demolition activity or construction activity that alters the footprint of the structure. That's where
Yes.
that's being covered.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's the
Exactly.
criteria.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
David,
I guess I just have a slight concern with this language from the perspective of tree protection, which is altering the footprint of an existing structure. So we have another warrant article that will be addressing accessory dwelling units. That would be a separate footprint because they don't necessarily have to be attached anymore. And to the extent, so that's one concern. Then the second one is to the extent that an excavation is part of a phased construction. So perhaps a foundation is put in, perhaps a property owner runs out of funds temporarily, or for whatever reason puts a pause, and we don't get to the construction portion of the project. That clearly could have an adverse impact on trees, but would not necessarily be covered by the warrant article. So that's why I do think it's important that we have a firm understanding of what counts as construction. And it sounds like from Paul Warren's question that this is not triggered by getting the permit from the building department. So I think we need to know what is the trigger.
Bernard?
yes.
So and I'm glad you raised Article 15, as you know, that I had the map distributed with the graphic and how many actual parcels will be affected by zoning Article 15. It's 8,200, and parcels that would likely be affected, meaning it fits the criteria of potentially adding an ADU, is 4,585. So 4,585. And this is a work in progress that Kara Bruton has shared with me, but this is one of the reasons why I actually think we need to put this article in place. You know, we are rezoning almost the entire town through this town meeting, specifically with new construction for ADUs and potentially Article 14. I do think it's prudent that we support this article. I do think you raise an interesting question. Does constructing an ADU, a new ADU or altering an existing accessory structure count as changing the footprint? Well, I think it would be, because it's a new footprint. It doesn't exist on the lot. And I think that, you know, the definition does cover a lot. So just for me, I'm grateful for the petitioners working with advisory and the planning board, and the process has come to a consensus article. We're down to one article, and it seems like it is supported by those parties that have been involved. So given the potential amount of new construction that would be taking place, depending on how this town meeting comes out, I'm inclined to support favorable action on this amended article.
David?
And I certainly agree. I'm not asking these questions from the position of wanting to oppose the warrant article. It's more whether we might want to consider a further revision to make sure that we really are protecting trees and properties to the fullest extent that we can. And I wonder if one way to do that would be to specify how deep of an excavation, because if clearly we're trying to avoid something that's minor, such as 5 feet to clear a bush, but we do want protection for putting in a basement, which would be a much greater depth, or just understanding what the term construction means exactly. That's where my questions are coming from.
Bernard?
Mike?
Yeah, Mike?
I think the question about ADUs is an interesting one, because someone could build an ADU with no structure and they're currently in their backyard, a brand new one.
Right. And so the question is, does that mean you're altering the
Right,
footprint by
exactly.
adding a structure?
So the simplest thing to do would be to simply add a reference to construction of a new structure on the same lot. And I think that would answer your question. Broadly, looking at the revisions in this, I think a lot of really good work has been done on it. And with that one, you know, what happens with something that's as complex as anything relating to permitting and zoning and these sorts of things, you always come up with some questions after the fact. And there may be a need to tweak it at some point in the future, but simply making that one change, I think, would respond to your question.
And I certainly agree with what you're saying, but rather than wait for a future town meeting to do that tweak, why don't we put it?
Oh, yeah, no.
Well, let's do it now.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I agree, absolutely. That's the sensible, and I don't think the petitioner would have any objection to that. I don't know about the advisory committee.
Could-
What's the tweak?
Yeah, what's the tweak?
Oh, the tweak is to reference
It's in
construction
4D.
of a new structure.
Yeah, so if we could put the AC article up on the screen, I think I have a proposed amendment. You need to scroll to 5.4D, Tree Protection and Mitigation Plan. Yeah, it's 5.4D.
Yeah, got it.
5.4D. It's in, it is in the packet.
It is in the packet.
Yeah.
And why don't I,
I can pull it up.
okay. So while she's pulling it up, this is what D reads. It says,
My packs don't have.
tree protection and mitigation plan. In the event of planned demolition activity or construction activity that alters the footprint of a structure on a lot. What I would suggest we do is say that in the event of planned demolition activity, the creation of a new structure
Yeah.
or construction activity that alters the footprint.
Exactly, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, just insert that phrase and that answers the point. And it's a good point. It's
So where excavation activity is crossed out under D.
Yep.
The first cross out, Tiffany,
Mhm.
we would add in activity, so in the event of planned demolition activity, creation of a new structure,
Right,
comma, or construction activity that alters the footprint.
yeah, perfect.
And I think you got it covered.
Okay, everyone agree on that? John?
I have no objection to what was added.
So I'd like to move favorable action.
Further discussion.
Well, I had some more questions.
Oh, you have more, okay.
I knew you.
I'm sorry. And I do want to say to the sponsors of this article, thank you very much for all the work you've done, and thank you for your patience in addressing all of these questions. But you know, and it seems like my colleagues on the board, at least some of them, are comfortable enough that they will see fit to send this forward with the latest of the changes. I'm not comfortable enough. I'm not comfortable when I hear our town council say it still raises constitutionality questions. And I'm not comfortable when I haven't heard where the money's going to come from to add the staff. If I thought adding the staff would have a dramatic effect on our protection of trees, maybe then I would just sort of swallow hard and say, okay, we're going to have to find money somewhere. I don't know where, and nobody has told me where. What's going to be sacrificed so that we can add the staff to take our already existing tree preservation bylaw. And may I pause here to correct if anyone listening tonight has the misunderstanding that Brookline never did anything as a result of the urban canopy report. I would like to help them understand that, in fact, in 2022, Brookline adopted a tree preservation bylaw. You can read all about it on the tree preservation bylaw page of the Brookline website. There you will find that adoption of that bylaw was followed by a lot of work to create regulations for the enforcement part of that bylaw. A lot of work was done to explain to average people how this bylaw might impact them. A lot of work was done to prevent there being any harmful or unintended consequences to our stormwater management from this bylaw. A lot of work was done to create an FAQ with a lot of useful information for people as to how they can figure out if our existing bylaw applies to them and their trees and their property. And we've had 2 years, and now we've decided the existing bylaw that we passed in 2022 doesn't do enough, doesn't achieve its objective sufficiently of protecting tree canopy. That part of what has motivated this, I agree with. I've heard from some people who were very involved in the 2022 bylaw that they do see some changes, some useful changes that could be made to the 2022 bylaw, but I still can't figure out if those are the changes that we ended up with. And when I hear that the Tree Planting Committee didn't see fit to endorse this and the Conservation Commission didn't see fit to endorse this, I worry that we didn't limit ourselves to the useful things that could be done to improve on the existing tree bylaw, that maybe we've, unnecessarily overcomplicated the 2022 tree protection bylaw that we passed. And if folks will just indulge me one more comment here. By accident, and it was purely by accident because I was actually in search of some other information, I happened to encounter a meeting that they had in Cambridge this past week. Cambridge is regarded as kind of the model for this. So Cambridge has had a tree protection bylaw since 2021. That's how recent a lot of this is. So I don't think Brookline needs to be ashamed that they didn't adopt their tree protection bylaw until 2022. Cambridge, at one of their meetings of a subcommittee of their city council just last week, got the first update since 2021. It's the first time that they have gathered and reported on any of the data from the impact of the tree protection bylaw that they adopted in Cambridge. So just to cite a couple of key data that were presented at this meeting in Cambridge, and this is Cambridge, larger than Brookline, maybe not larger when it comes to the number of canopy trees, but they've had only 190 permits that had to be granted for trees that otherwise would have been healthy and survived in 3 years in Cambridge. So that works out to 60+ trees per year that weren't going to be, that weren't unhealthy, weren't in need of removal, and that actually required replacement trees to be planted under the Cambridge Tree Protection Bylaw, 60+ per year. And, you know, to achieve that, and by the way, there's no way of knowing, given that presentation of that data point, if those 65+ people who replaced their healthy trees would have done it anyway. That's usually the situation with people who have trees that, you know, they wish to replace. The situation is usually that it's an unhealthy tree, that it's a dead tree, that it's a tree that would not survive, or it's a tree that qualifies for an exemption even under this proposed bylaw. But only in 190 cases was it a tree that otherwise could have been left alone and would have survived. And of that 190, we don't know how many would have been replaced anyway. So it does come down to, you know, what is the best way to protect canopy trees? And I think a reasonable case could be made that if we're going to add 60 trees that otherwise would not have been protected to our canopy, our tree canopy per year, there are other ways that we can do it that don't involve, you know, creating a cumbersome bureaucracy for checking on every single incident of every single tree every time it arises, when we don't know how we're going to find the money to pay for the staff to do that. So I've still got a lot of reservations, and I don't know if they can be resolved by the time of town meeting. But you know, when I have reservations, I feel like I have to put them on the table.
Bernard?
Okay, yeah.
I guess it's very dangerous to take a single statistic and run with it. But if there are a relatively small number of trees in the course of a year that need to be replaced, presumably there are a relatively small number of trees that that come under the bylaw and therefore need to be looked at. Where is the concern about additional staff?
Well, to protect those 190 trees required also checking up on 578 trees that actually were in need of removal.
In the course of 3 years.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's the information that was reported by the authorities in Cambridge. So, you know.
Okay. This is a debate between us, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
This is not a public debate, I'm sorry.
So you're talking about about 200 trees that have to be looked at in the course of the year.
No. You have to go to the site every time a tree is to be removed. The person has to have someone come out to the site, confirm either that it's dying, dead, or for other reasons, you know, qualifies for an exemption, or is a tree that is actually protected because it's still healthy and you don't get an exemption for it. And that only occurred in 190 cases in 3 years.
But if there were a little bit less than 600 over the course of 3 years that had to be looked at, that's a couple of hundred trees. It's on average one a day, something like that.
I mean, you know, Cambridge could speak to how many people they have who are dedicated to this task, but, and I don't know that number.
Yeah. Just, John, I think it's useful to put that into context. You know, it's not like somebody has to be employed to survey a forest every day.
Well, maybe we don't need to appropriate money then. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just addressing this cost issue, the explanation provided by the Human Services Subcommittee report on warrant Article 16 says that the cost to the town could be as high as $272,000 annually for 2 additional FTEs. It sounds like Mike thinks it won't be anywhere near that high, but even if it were, we are funding a new sustainability division, and preserving our tree canopy, I would think, would be part of their efforts.
I see our town
The town
administrator
council is
shaking
is
his
either
head.
nervous or he's shaking his head.
No, sorry, and I didn't want to cut you off, but
Go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean, the answer to that would be no. It would probably live in parks and open space, because that's where the public tree preservation work is going to be centered. So, you may recall in the 2023 override, there were actually 2 positions put into that override for the public tree canopy. And those are actually slated to be funded this year as part of the FY26 budget. When it comes to the question of where would this money come from, I have to be honest with you, I don't know. The easiest solution would be basically to cut the public program and turn it into a private program, but I don't think that's in the spirit of the override. That would contravene what the voters voted for. We're looking at a $1.2 million deficit for FY26 right now. When I say we don't have the money, we don't have the money. So I think we would need to figure out what we would need to cut were this warrant article to pass. And I appreciate that petitioners are thinking creatively about this. I think it's important to think through all of the things the petitioners are thinking about. But even when you think about, one of the solutions proposed is, well, we can hire an outside contractor. We don't have the funds for that. We could hire one FTE, and that it's going to require cuts elsewhere in DPW's budget. So, the thought is maybe we do ramp this up slowly and see where we go. But the other portion of this raised by this conversation is it doesn't sound like this is a self-sustaining operation, right? We're not going to get, we can't bank. It's the same way that the state is dealing with the millionaire's tax now, right? We can't bank on that money to fund an operating position when we don't know the revenue we're going to get. And the details from other communities suggest that we probably won't get the amount of revenue it would require to add 1 or 2 FTEs. So I understand petitioners don't agree with that analysis. But maybe if you have data you're willing to send me, I'm willing to be corrected on it. But
May I ask the petitioner a question about the funding mechanism and what their estimate would be?
Allow that, but let's be careful not to get into
All right.
another hearing.
Right, just the narrow question about the estimate of up to 272,000 annually. Could you speak to that, or as to what you think a more realistic number would be? Whether there could be a slow ramp up if there are financial concerns from the town?
We agree with DPW's number. We included an extensive pro forma analysis where we ran 16 different scenarios using Cambridge's data, which, by the way, they've had their tree preservation bylaw in place since 2004. It was just most recently updated in 2021. They have 5.5 years of data online. We pulled all their data. We looked at the number of tree payments into the tree fund that they were averaging per year, and we modeled different scenarios. And in all of the scenarios that we modeled, the revenue, the payments into the tree fund were sufficient to cover the costs of administration. So we're not disputing DPW's number. We agree with that it would probably take 2 FTEs, at a minimum 1 to start. But if you look at what Cambridge's experience has been, it has generated sufficient payments, far more payments than we're projecting for Brookline, into their program so that it is self-funding.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? What's the, you wanted to make a motion?
Well, yeah, so there's, nothing has been stated that has moved me off of supporting the article. So unless there's more discussion, I'd like to move favorable action on Article 16 as amended.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, John Van Scoyac,
No.
Michael Sandman?
Aye.
Paul Warren?
Aye.
David Perlman?
Aye.
I guess I'll say aye too. Although I do have some concerns that John has. So.
Well, thank you.
And can I just clarify that as amended by the advisory committee and the Warren amendment as well, the one that you presented earlier?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next, warrant Article 8. Regarding minimum lot size requirements when granting a special permit for the conversion of single-family building into 2-family units. Yes.
So Warren Article 8, the advisory current position is referral to the Comprehensive Planning Steering Committee. That vote was 17 to 1 to 2. I have not heard from the petitioner whether or not they intend on still moving the article despite the referral motion.
Any discussion?
Uh,
Paul?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Either way, I were probably about to say the same thing.
Well, what I thought would be helpful is Kara Bruton had done some really heavy lifting over the weekend and late last week for me with respect to all the zoning articles. And I'm hoping, could you pull up the map just so that we can see it together? I think this would be helpful for context. This map, which is admittedly a work in progress. Kara had messaged me today that the table on the lower right-hand corner, which is shows the number of units that would be included in the zoning change, not the units, but parcels, and then how many parcels might be affected. For Article 8, I think it's estimated because they missed the F district. But this graphic shows all of the zoning articles, except it doesn't show Article 10 and 11. And if actually 10 and 11 were included in there, that white strip down the middle would be colored in, because that's actually Harvard Street, which is the MBTA Communities Act. But you can see from this graphic that almost the entire town is being rezoned during this town meeting. Every parcel just about is shaded. Now, what the planning department did was they color coded it by article. So if you look at the lower right-hand corner, this graphic depicts Article 7, which is the 2.5 story article. Article 8, which is the one we're talking about now. Article 9, which is the +1, the upzoning to 2 to 3 families. Article 14, which is a tweak in the ownership structure of second units. And then Article 15, which is the ADUs. And, Tiffany, if you could do me a favor and just blow up the corner, go down to the right-hand corner table and just really increase that so we can look at it in detail. Again, this is for context. So if you look at Article 7, which we already voted for, I'm not asking for a change in that, but there are 5,600 parcels. These are things that you could go look and see your address and see if you're going to be impacted having a zoning change for your parcel. Article 7. For Article 8, it's 4,000 parcels with approximately 1,100 parcels that would be affected, meaning it would be likely that the configuration of the parcel, the building on that parcel, would trigger potentially the creation of an additional unit. And that number is estimated because the F districts weren't included in this specific analysis. Article 9, there's 2,100 parcels that would be directly having their zoning changed, and then potentially another 1,100 parcels that could potentially add a third unit. Article 14 is the least one. It's 700 parcels with 240 units. And the whopper is Article 15, which is the ADU article. 8,200 parcels would have their zoning change, and potentially about 4,600 of those parcels would have the possibility for an additional unit being an ADU being added. When I spoke of maybe 2 weeks ago about this, that we haven't looked holistically at the amount of zoning change that we're going through and the potential for the number of units that could potentially be created. This gives you a sense of how extensive some of the zoning changes are. And again, some of them are well articulated and why. But importantly, when we did the MBTA Communities Act, we spent an incredible amount of time talking with, communicating with, engaging with the community to get feedback on articles. Much of the articles that are before us haven't had the benefit of that level of engagement. And I dare say that I would wager that the vast majority of the parcel owners don't even know this is coming, right? So, and I appreciate our professional staff has done, a good job with Article 7 and planning. They've done a good job with 14 and 15. The citizen petition articles haven't benefited from the same rigorous analysis and impact analysis. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I know we're only talking about Article 8 right now, but when I raised a little bit of concern about the amount of change that's coming, I thought it would be helpful for us to be able to see that together.
Michael.
So first of all, that is a very, very helpful graphic. So to the planning department, thank you very much. That's, I was actually, I pulled out a book today entitled The Visual Communication of Quantitative Information by a man named Edward Tufte, which is a superb piece of work describing how you communicate information like this, and this gets an A+. It's great. I think I was going to say, Paul, before you, that I would vote I would vote in favor of referring this to the Comprehensive Planning Committee right from the get-go. I mean, even if we didn't have all of these other things
Yeah.
going on. I do think it's important to note that the Comprehensive Planning Committee produces a comprehensive plan, doesn't produce a zoning article.
You're 100% right.
But when you aggregate all of the things that we're doing, it does obviously have an aggregated effect. And this one in particular is something that probably belongs in, it does need to get that careful look and that communication with the rest of the community. So that's where I would vote.
David.
I agree with what Mike is saying, but it does make me wonder whether we should reconsider warrant Article 7. Now, Paul and I had abstained on that one, I think for the same reason, that we felt that 7, 8, and 9 should all be referred to comprehensive planning, so that we're not picking winners, as you put it, but so that we are engaging in the public process more and letting the comprehensive plan influence what we end up doing moving forward. And so I wonder if we're really going to be consistent on that, should we be considering warrant Article 7? As we can see from this very helpful map, from a geographic perspective, warrant Article 7 impacts a majority of the town.
Okay, so you have to find someone who voted,
Right.
the other
Right, I'm
way
just
to
asking the question, if
ask
somebody
the
feels that way.
question. Mike?
Well, the basis for my vote, at least on Article 7, was that we were responding to a vote in town meeting. And to me, that's that's as good a voice of the community as one is going to have in the for this kind of a situation. So I would not move for reconsideration.
Okay, David?
That vote, though, was to address a concern about demolitions, and so I understand how the planning department feels that warrant Article 7 would discourage demolitions. But we could also say that we should rezone so that everything is only one story. That might reduce demolitions as well. So there's some, we can take an extreme position on something that would slow demolitions as well. So I don't know if that in and of itself should be reason enough to not refer.
Can I just recommend that the debate on reopening 7 should probably get postponed until we can put it on the calendar?
Right, yeah, so that's what I was gonna say, is we can't actually even put it on the calendar tonight. We can't reconsider it tonight because it's not noticed in such a way that we could do it. So I didn't want to reopen 7, frankly, for tonight. And I may not suggest we do it in the future. I just wanted to provide context.
Yeah.
And so I agree with Mike's suggestion that we go with what the advisory committee did on 8 and refer it. Now, it happens to be referred to the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. It would be the subject matter and not the specific article, because we're not going to bring the article back.
Okay, so I'll take that as a motion to refer. And I would agree with that, since the petitioner said that she has a court case that solves her problem.
Right, there was a- right?
So all in favor of, and we didn't vote this already, right?
No.
Okay, just checking. I move referral with respect to warrant Article 8. I move referral to the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee with respect to the subject matter of this warrant article. Is that accurate? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Mike Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, thank you.
So for Article 9, the advisory committee motion is also referral 16 to 5 to 1. I have not heard whether or not the petitioner still intends on making a motion under this article.
And we did not vote that either.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I would make the same argument on Article 9.
Okay. Any objection to that?
Same argument being
Let's refer to the subject matter. to the
comprehensive planning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I move that warrant article, what are we on?
Nine.
Okay, excuse me. 9 be, the subject matter of warrant article 9 be referred to the Comprehensive Plan Committee. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay,
Article 10, the advisory committee motion is favorable action, 22 to 0 to 1.
and that's the Harvard Street's form-based zoning
Yes.
adjustments, minor adjustments, right?
These are material adjustments for
yeah.
the,
Yeah,
for
with
the
respect
materials
to
and stuff.
material,
Yep.
yeah.
And this was put forward by the planning department.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion or? Okay, I move what do we, okay, this is
Favorable.
favorable action.
Yeah.
I move approval of favorable action for zoning warrant article 10. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Sorry, Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay,
For-
next.
For Article 11, a motion of favorable action failed at the advisory committee, 2 to 16 to 2.
Okay, and this is Stephen Heiken's proposal.
Well, it's the planning board's,
Right, presented to us by
Stephen.
Heiken.
Yeah.
Any discussion of that? Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So my thought, our last discussion, the primary issue raised was that our investment in form-based zoning, which is significant, on Harvard Street, was intended to provide for predictability to the development community, to provide for an expectation of what the result would be by the abutters who participated in helping to define the work that the planning department did for form-based zoning. And it's been in place all of a year. To offer to provide the planning board with this pretty broad discretion, I think on massing and some other things. I'm not in support of it. I feel like we're undoing all the work, much of the work that we did, some of the work that we did for form-based zoning. So I don't know. I'm not really comfortable with undoing that portion of it. I agree with what we just voted for 10, but 11 seems like maybe a little bit too much.
Mike,
Well, I disagree. I think it's very much in the spirit of making form-based zoning is great in the sense that it gives anyone, a developer or anyone else, a clear sense of what is available by right.
Yeah.
And it provides a very straightforward process. But when somebody comes in and says, well, we look at the materials that are now being allowed, and just been expanded perhaps if Article 10 passes, we'd like to do something a little bit different. And I remember Steve Heiken showed us the building with the windows not aligned, and my own response to that was, I don't really care for that. But that's a design decision that the planning board is able to make. I don't think that we're undoing anything. I think we're making it possible to make what is essentially a pretty rigid structure a little bit more flexible. And we have a very good planning board. They and we have had for as long as I can remember. And I trust that we will continue to have a planning board that doesn't go off the deep end in their findings that something that's really strange is acceptable, and in the spirit of form-based zoning.
Dave.
I agree with Mike in part about the spirit of Article 11, but the details really do matter. And the notion that we're going to leave something to the discretion of the planning board, the composition of which will certainly change over time. That does take away some of the certainty, which is the point of form-based zoning. I agree that there probably are more modifications that need to be made, but I think the way to do that would either be with another Article 10 style warrant article that comes back at a subsequent town meeting, perhaps with defining some ranges. He gave, the planning board gave examples such as bay windows, that maybe those were too narrow and why not have it up to 14 feet? And I trust that Steve Heineken is right about that. But the way to address it is by establishing ranges so that there's still the predictability, that we have some idea of what's going to get built, and so that developers know ahead of time what they will or will not be able to do. And I think ranges can accomplish that, and perhaps broadening the materials list a little more. But I'm not comfortable supporting just sort of a blanket discretion. So I intend to vote no on this, but it's not because I don't agree that there could be further adjustments. I think it should be ranges and defined.
Great.
That's
John?
persuasive. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think David said it well. You know, I think it's to have what a person, an architect, a planning board full of architects might think is a better version of the design guidelines that we should incorporate in our reform-based zoning is one thing. Because they have in mind that they might have a better version than is in the reform-based zoning bylaw that was passed by town meeting, they should therefore be given kind of carte blanche to decide, you know, in which instances do they want to grant exemptions or variations, you know, to proposals that don't meet with the form-based zoning guidelines, is just to essentially undo form-based zoning. And if they want to get specific and come back, just as they did with the building materials, the distinction between this and what they did with building materials is clear. They thought certain building materials were excluded that should be added, and they met with the planning department, and they came to some sort of agreement on a proposed warrant article that specifies which building materials should be added that weren't in the original form-based zoning. This is very different. And it's different in a way that I'm clearly not comfortable with and don't feel we should approve.
Okay, I was persuaded by David's comment, and I'd like to move no action on that. But Mike?
Well, I think it's important to read what it says here. Certain things may be allowed by the planning board following a public hearing with a specific list of findings that note that elements that diverge from the from form-based zoning, basically, why the overall design is substantially consistent with the code. In other words, they can't, if you, anybody familiar with the Stata Center over at MIT? It's a really interesting building. It's
Stack of books.
Pardon?
Stack of books.
It looks like a stack of books that's falling over. So I don't think that the Stata Center would be an overall design that was substantially consistent with the code. I don't think it's going to go wild. I'm sensitive to the point that we're departing somewhat, but David was honestly, David was persuasive until John's comments. I would be willing to vote in favor of the article at this point.
I don't know what I said that contradicted David. Anyway,
So
I
echoed him.
Logical conclusion, which I appreciate.
in the spirit of
Okay,
getting,
Paul?
it's just in the spirit of getting through the night, I was hoping to maybe offer up a motion. Did you already make the motion?
No, you can make the motion.
Okay,
Go for it.
Move up, no action on Article 11.
Okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
And this is in favor of no action. Aye.
Michael Sandman,
No.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
David Perlman,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye. Okay, warrant Article 14.
Article 14, the advisory committee vote is 20 to 2 in favor of referral to the Comprehensive Steering Committee.
Okay. Okay, any discussion of this?
Hold on a sec.
Yeah, I need to find my place again. Sorry.
Pardon me?
I need to find my place again. Excuse me for a second.
Find it?
Yep, yep.
Any discussion, anything you want to say, Melissa? Okay. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'm unsure on this one, and I think it might be helpful to hear from the planning department, if that's okay, as to, I've heard different things about this. It's a minor change. It just makes us consistent with state law. It's about ownership, and currently we have different, Maria, maybe you could help clear the air on this. Why do we absolutely need this, and what does it do?
Sure. Maria Morelli, Senior Planner in the Regulatory Division. So I want to make it clear that the actual two sections allow this provision. They already allow a special permit, but for rentals. They don't have the same parity for condos. And we're just introducing that parity for at least one district where we think it might be helpful to, again, conserve some of those smaller buildings which are in the M1 district. So we talked about maybe 8% of those parcels are on the smaller side and detached. Why not have that parity for condos? We've been approached in the last year by 2 homeowners, not investors, who could benefit from that.
So Maria, I had heard one argument that the condominium law has been in place for decades.
Yes.
And this hasn't really been an issue. Why is it becoming an issue now?
Well, I wouldn't have brought it up unless we had 2 constituents who were homeowners who want to age in place. That boomer demographic is a very large demographic. I think it's maybe neck and neck with the millennials. And so of course that demographic, you're going to see more people aging, and these questions are coming up about how can I stay in my community? I can't really afford to leave. I would like to move to, say, a single family on my same property. Would I be able to condoize for my heirs? So
Does Article 15 cover that? Because Article 15 allows an accessory dwelling unit, and it can have separate ownership, right?
right, but these 2 people, they own 2 families. So it's not like they were going to be able
This
to
is essentially allowing an
create-
ADU in a
right,
family district.
exactly.
Oh, okay.
Right. And these are large lots. So these are like 8,000 square feet. I do a lot of multifamily development review where you can put 20, maybe 20 units, maybe not in M1, but you can certainly put multiple units. And for something like that, a developer would want to have it take up most of the lot and put up a big, which is fine. That's what multifamily districts are for. But then we also don't want to lose some of those in between missing middle housing forms, if they already exist. Why not allow people to make use of that?
Okay.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I had a question.
Yes.
I don't recall if we heard whether there's been an advisory committee vote on this.
They voted to refer it.
They voted to refer.
Yep.
Our packet doesn't seem to include their report on it. Is that
The report's not in there, but Melissa had just said that
22 to 2.
20 to 2.
20 to 2 to
Yeah.
2?
They
Yeah.
voted to
You don't
refer
always
it.
get the reports. And
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's unfortunate. I'd love to be able to read their report.
David?
Could you maybe give us a brief synopsis on why they voted to refer?
I was probably with you when they were doing that, so unfortunately I cannot.
Maria, can you provide some insight? And what is your position? I assume I know.
Maria Morelli once again. If I can recall, there was a lot of comments about different scenarios, and I think it was maybe more of a philosophical feeling that it was something that should be thought of more holistically. And I would say that in my opinion, it was just a little frustrating that people lost sight of the fact that these two sections already allow a special permit provision. So I think that there was some interest in trying to rethink the whole concept in the bylaw, which was not our point. We just wanted to have parity. That's all.
You would still need a special permit. This isn't by right. You still need a special permit.
Absolutely.
You just need to, it's a special permit, and s- in addition to it potentially being a rental, it could also be an ownership.
That's
But
right.
you need to do the special permit.
That's right.
Okay, unless anyone objects, I'd move favorable action. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Aye, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Arr, arr.
Arr, too.
That's what happened.
Pirate
That's an eye with a grumble in it. Yeah, I'm a little
With the
uncomfortable.
Pirate Simmons, right?
I'm a little uncomfortable because we don't have the advisory committee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then this is not, act like a pirate day. It's just, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael Sandman,
Aye.
Paul Warren.
I vote R.
Arr. Yeah.
David Perlman.
Just trying to figure out, so we're voting whether to support. the
Yes,
motion.
this is
Yeah,
favorable.
Favorable action.
I would want more information. I'm going to have to abstain.
Okay, chair votes aye. Okay, now the main show here,
main
is, warrant article 15.
So Article 15, in your packet, you have a memo from Dick Benka and Roger Blood. You also have planning staff here. Advisory has not taken a position on this most recent amendment. I just will remind you that Thursday is the deadline for the combined reports. So if you want something to be mailed in the combined reports, tonight's your opportunity to do so.
Will advisory have something by?
They won't, I don't think they'll have it in time.
So they're meeting next Wednesday. So a week from tomorrow, they're taking this up. So like,
Oh,
they're,
why not cut it close?
so we're not going to hear from them. It's up to us.
Okay, so how are we gonna do this? It's gonna be Dick and Roger first, and then you're gonna respond, or, pardon me?
For the petitioners?
Yeah.
Petitioners go first.
So they go
Okay,
first.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I was wondering why they're coming up.
So Kara Bruton, Director of Planning. Jonathan Simpson's going to be joining us in just a couple minutes. Is this your last agenda item for tonight?
Yes,
Does
Mhm.
anybody want to take a 5-minute break and see if Jonathan Simpson might join us? No.
sure,
I think that's a great idea.
yeah.
Thank you.
I predict taking a 5 minute break.
5-minute break.
Okay.
You've got my vote as a result of that.
That would be just to see if Jonathan can join us. He had some,
Oh,
Early.
you're waiting for Jonathan.
yeah, he had some introductory remarks I think would be helpful.
tell me
And I can pull up
exactly
this
what this is
presentation.
now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know if Jonathan is joining?
He should be. He was going to join at 7:30, so.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha.
We don't.
We're coming back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We're back. The Select Board meeting, special Select Board meeting for November 4th, 2024. So, Ms. Bruton, please make your presentation
Thank
on
you.
warrant Article 15.
Yes, so warrant Article 15, again, Kara Bruton, Director of Planning. Jonathan Simpson will be joining us online as soon as he can. And he did have some kind of overarching comments that I think will be very important for you to hear from him. But in the interest of time, you're gonna let me know when he arrives, and I'll get started on our status update. So just want to, first of all, speaking of Jonathan Simpson, say thank you to Jonathan and Town Council, and also Roger Blood and Dick Benka, Becca Mapuri, who's online with us, and really the lead of this article for our department, and Maria Morelli and Polly Selko have all spent dozens of hours on this article. And there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of understanding, even when we slip back 2 steps, of coming to a common understanding, at least understanding, if not agreement and everything. So just wanted to stop and say thank you. This town runs on volunteers like Mr. Benka and Mr. Blood. And I know that their source of energy comes from caring deeply about their community. So I just wanted to start with that in mind. The first slide I wanted to just kind of set the stage with us all here is something that we kept losing track of, and at least I did, even within our department, which is that when the state passed this law this summer to allow accessory dwelling units more broadly, they decided very intentionally to put that language in Section 3 of the Zoning Act. This is the same section that people sometimes refer to as Dover cases. It's a specialized list of uses that the state wants to make sure are not unduly regulated. So religious institutions, solar panels, handicap access, daycares, education, right? These are cases that we hear all the time, and where there is case law that exists for these so-called Section 3 uses, which in practice has shown a wide deference to those uses rather than overregulated locally. We'll see how that all plays out. I just wanted to make sure that everybody here understands that the state did intentionally put accessory dwelling units into this Section 3 very specialized subset of uses that should be broadly allowed by right and not overregulated. Now, taking a step back. So thanks to Paul Warren for asking to get some mapping going to have a better sense of what's going on. So this is a zoning district map, which shows all of the various zoning districts in town and overlaid, hard to see here, but we can send you in the packets and it'll be easier in just a second. In black are all of the places where there are actually single family buildings. So there's wide places, for example, like the municipal golf course, the country club, those big yellow pockets in the middle where it's single family zoning, but there's not single family houses there now. What this warrant article does is addresses where and how accessory dwelling units can be built, layering that on top of the state regulations so that we have some regulations in place that make sense for Brookline. And those regulations we're proposing would be anywhere where single family uses are allowed today. So to give you a sense of what that means, this is like a foreground map. This is the same shape of Brookline. These are all single family buildings. So all of these buildings, no matter what district they're in, that's all of our single family homes today. So they are broadly throughout town, except for some, again, the golf course areas, the commercial areas, especially around Coolidge Corner. And then one thing that we agreed to very early on working together is that although we should allow accessory dwelling units and not overregulate, we felt comfortable making sure that there was a maximum floor area ratio of 130% of what the zoning table otherwise allows, as a maximum cap, no matter what else is going on. So to give you a sense of what that means, about 20% of these black dots would go away, would not be able to add additional square footage in order to build an ADU. So graphically, we're going from this to this. That just kind of shows you how that it starts to become a narrower set of parcels where they haven't already built more than 130% of what they're allowed to build by zoning, and therefore would not by floor area be able to build a detached unit unless they took some part of their existing structure down. If we could zoom back out a little
Can
bit.
you just go back to those
Yeah.
slides? That was helpful. Yeah, good.
So those are all the single family buildings.
Right.
And those are the ones that are left that aren't 130%.
And is that your 4,000?
That, is that mapped to that kind of 4,800 number?
Yep, so this gets us to that 4,800 number.
Thank you.
So the FAR is just one layer of regulation that's in this very complex article. Others include the existing open space that's in the zoning requirements, setbacks, which I hope will get a lot of direction from you all there's one thing I would love from you all tonight as people that I work for, and that is feedback on where you want to go with the setbacks on this warrant article so that we can take that and move on and come out with an article to move forward with. So we have FAR, setbacks, open space, distance between detached units in the principal structure, maximum footprint that a detached ADU could be, the number of stories, 1.5 for detached units, and there's some others in the details, but those are the big ones. Okay, and if we could zoom back out a little bit, sorry. Thank you.
But you might have to do it on your end, Kira.
Oh, I'm sorry. What? Oh,
That's pretty good.
okay. Oh, that's weird. It looks normal here. Let me see.
So this chart was in your memo that we sent to you all on Friday and is basically a summary of where we're at with setbacks. So right now, principal structures, so anybody's home, multifamily, there are different setback requirements from the side, rear, front yard. And right now, by special permit, you can have that distance of setback go down to 0 feet all throughout town by special permit with the Board of Appeals. That's today's condition. Okay, you can go down to 0 feet for any principal structure. What we are agreeing to is that for a detached accessory dwelling unit, that those should be regulated even more than a regular structure and have some minimum side yard and rear yard setbacks that even by special permit, you can't go beyond. So for example, in the smallest districts in the S4, that first row there, the S4, S7, SE7, TF districts, we are saying, sure, by special permit, you can go down from what's otherwise required, but no matter what happens, the Board of Appeals would not be able to give a special permit for an ADU, new construction, or even a new addition that's less than 6 feet. And where Dick Benka and Roger Blood are, 7.5 feet. On the rear, we're at 7.5, they're at 10. And S15, it goes up a little bit more, and then S25 and S40 a little bit more. So you can see where those differences are. And again, those differences are in your packet. If my son were looking at this chart, he would say, what's the big deal? There's a couple feet here. Can't we get a deal done? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So also in your packet, we put graphics from several different zoning districts. This one is kind of one of the more tighter examples that we could find, the kind of worst case scenario where you would still be allowed to have a detached accessory dwelling unit, because that's where the gap still remains. So this is an example of a 2-family T5 district. One of the other layers of regulations that I was talking about earlier is the minimum usable open space. So that's in our existing zoning that would remain with this, in this case, and it's based on the square footage of the principal structure. So when I showed you that foreground of, all of the black dots, and then it kind of went down by 20%, this is an example, this one lot here, where they haven't built out so much by more than 130%. They also have enough open space in their rear yard that they would still be conforming to the minimum open space. So those are additional restrictions that keep kind of layering on of, if you want to do a detached ADU, where would one likely put it? Where one could one put it? So this green box here is a 20-foot by 20-foot ADU. These things tend to be, if they're building new construction, tend to be square or fairly square, either 20 by 20, 23 by 23, something like that. And what you'll see is this is showing what would happen if this Board of Appeals granted the absolute minimum distance between side and rear yards. The side showing here is 6 feet away from the property line. The rear is 7.5 feet from the property line. You'll also notice that the distance between the green box there and the principal structure is only 7.5 feet. That has to be a minimum of 6 feet. So we're really, very, very tightly fitting something here in an extreme condition. What you'll also see though is that green square is 38 feet away from the principal structure to the rear. Okay. And it's only 15 feet diagonally from the green box to the side abutter. And so generally in concept, what I wanted to try to get across here is that however we adjust these minimum setbacks by special permit, every foot that we increase in the rear yard setback will likely mean decreasing the distance to the side abutter. So we're trading off the point of view from someone that lives in the rear that already has, 30, 40 feet of distance, of that distance getting even larger, so that this person to the side of you now has a living structure that's closer to them. That's the main point, that it's pulling a string. And in many of these neighborhoods, that houses are closer to each other side by side than they are rear to rear. I'm going to pause there in case there's a question. No? Okay. And then finally, this is where we are strongly in agreement, and hopefully will be a little bit of levity at the end of this. This is the kind of structure that we would like to be converted to an ADU very easily. This is an example of a lot that is not in a local historic district. There is nothing that would prevent the homeowner from eventually demolishing the structure. It is also a structure that is in Roger Reed and Greer Hardwick's book on historic garages in Brookline. Like it's, it is considered a very important part of the historic fabric, but not protected regulatory wise. So where we're at is we would like to see the structure to be able to be converted to an ADU without a special permit to encourage people to reuse these kinds of buildings. However, so this is the red top, belongs to the red top house to the left, and the gray top is the neighbor next door. And the map to the right shows that kind of shifted 90 degrees. So the red top square is this gray square here. The red top principal house is at the top of the map, and the gray top roof is at the bottom of the map here. So this is a condition that we find all the time in Brookline, where the accessory structure, like a garage like this, does not align, is not parallel with the side lot line. Sometimes it's not parallel with the rear lot line because streets aren't straight and people make different design choices over hundreds of years. So this garage, as an example, it's in an S7 district, which is one of the smaller, most compact single-family districts. The existing garage varies between 3.5 and 7 feet from the side property line. If you think about, well, what's it to that actual abutter to the side, it's between 20 and 21 feet. There are windows on this side of the accessory structure. In our version, as I understand it, we would allow those windows to stay. We agree that they should probably be translucent. In other words, not see-through if they are so closer than 6 feet from that side property line. But we are saying that we think that they should be allowed to be operable, move the window back and forth. And the Blood and Binka amendment, as I understand it, is that that could only be allowed by special permit if it's required by building code. So I think that's almost it. Oh, yep. So finally, clarification slide. After the 2 memos that you saw, we are both in agreement that there should not be further setback relief that could be granted under section 543, which is that section I was telling you about earlier, where you could go down to 0. We don't think you should go down to 0 either. In their version, they talk about how buildings smaller than 200 square feet should not be allowed to be part of a conversion if they're located closer than you could otherwise get by special permit. We're in agreement. That's an example of like a tool shed, very small tool shed. Does that to use Roger's phrase, is that the camel with his nose in the tent to do something larger. And then we're also in agreement that these buildings that are looking to convert, that they should have been in existence for at least 5 years. So those are the slides. I don't know if Jonathan's joined us yet.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Do we know where he is? Do you want to text him?
But yeah, we're texting back and forth, and I'm happy to turn it over to other part of the crew. No, I have to look it up. We switch now?
Yeah.
So Bernard, are we going to hear from the amendment and then we'll have a chance to have
Yep.
questions for both?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the best way.
Fine, yeah.
I assume Roger or Dick are gonna be very precise in terms of where the differences lie and not elaborate on where you agree.
Good evening. I'm Roger Blood. I'm on the Housing Advisory Board, but not speaking for the Housing Advisory Board yet because the board will not be taking this up until the day after tomorrow. Dick Benk and I have taken to heart your urging from the last time we met here to work as hard as we could to seek as much convergence and consensus with the department and the staff since we last met, and we have enjoyed many hours together with the staff. And as with Kara, I want to express our gratitude and appreciation for their patience with us. And we've all had, I think, a good education and exchange. And that has resulted in a substantial agreement on many things that were not agreed upon the last time we saw you here. And the narrowing of, a considerable narrowing of differences on most of the remaining items. However, as you've heard from Kara, there are several items that still remain unresolved. And we think it's mainly perhaps a difference in the priorities or the perspective perhaps that Dick and I have brought to the subject compared with the staff's approach. I'd like to take just a very brief moment to share with you a few of sort of the guiding principles that Dick and I have applied throughout this, which may help explain a bit where we're coming from, even though the metric differences might not seem that great at this point. First of all, I think we all recognize to begin with the importance of both the state statute and the town's intended passage of this article from the standpoint that we all want to help erase the housing crisis and produce some housing through ADUs and do it in a way that has the broad support of the community and town meeting, but while not unreasonably restricting. And those are three critical words that Jonathan Simpson for Town Council has been very good at calling the balls and strikes in our long discussions. We have agreed, I think we are only seeking to include in this article what only is clearly required by the new state statute and to exclude everything else. And I think I'm happy to say at this point that that's agreed and done. A couple of things have been postponed and a lot have been removed. We are continuing to acknowledge the need for the broad town meeting support to have this go through with a high level of support, while at the same time not overstepping and getting a strike call that we are unreasonably restricted. We think that we're pretty confident at this point that that Dick Benka's and our proposal, our alternative substitute, has not reached beyond where Town Council has said you've done something that unreasonably restricts. One high priority that Dick and I have given throughout all of these discussions is to acknowledge the very significant differences in the intensity of use of any given building, whatever its dimensions might be. When we're talking about dimensions, the greater intensity of use of an occupied dwelling unit versus a vacant shed, garage, or carriage house in terms of activity, noise, light, you name it, music. And finally, that I think we may be giving a bit greater attention to the impact and the reaction of abutters to the new bylaw that's providing, considerable authority here. I've often said that every homeowner that begins to understand what we're doing, the first question they're going to ask is, what does this let me do? And right behind that question is, what does this let my neighbor do? And we're trying to answer that in a way that will retain a broad base of support for the greater good here. As you'll see in Dick Benka's remarks to follow, and the few visuals that we'll be sharing with you, the two general areas, and there are only two really, that remain, maybe for you to decide how we should proceed, as Kara suggested. The first are setbacks, and specifically how much added relief or side and rear yard setbacks are appropriate beyond the by right, as of right setbacks that we have agreed on and are going to be in the proposed bylaw. And the second is how we should set certain rules for what we're calling pre-existing non-conforming unoccupied units. And these are the sheds, garages, and carriage houses that are much closer to the line. And there are hundreds and hundreds of these throughout the town, largely in North Brookline, but also elsewhere. What are reasonable kinds of rules that would produce desirable end results for the applicant, for the abutters, and for the production of housing? And Kara gave a terrific example of a significant garage that we would all like to see converted and not demolished to advance our goals. So at this point, Dick Benka is going to do the heavy lifting and give you some more specifics of how we view these two general areas.
Thank you very much. Dick Benka, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 14. And let me start by thanking Kara for her kind comments, and let me reciprocate those and thank the department for their professionalism during this process. We have spent a lot of time together addressing some of the issues. Let me just say that as you consider setbacks and the related issues, I'd ask you to keep in mind a couple of facts that underlie this. First is permissible building height will be increased from 15 feet for accessory buildings to 22 feet for ADUs with an occupied second floor. So there's a significant increase in massing under either proposal right from the get-go. And the setbacks are set against that backdrop. Secondly, the Affordable Homes Act does not allow the town to require owner occupancy. So you're more likely to have absentee investors, developers, and landlords involved in this process, and less likely to have neighbors working with each other to try to mitigate abutter impacts. We've agreed with the department on by right setbacks. The by right setbacks for the smaller lots ranging up to the S10 districts would be only 7.5 to 10 feet, even without special permit relief. I would say a small correction is needed on both the department and the substitute motion submissions. The side yard setback I noted today for an SC10 district is only 7.5 feet and not 10 feet. So we both have to clean that up. Both of us did feel that the one family dwelling rear yard setbacks were unnecessarily large if they were applied to ADUs. So they've been reduced by half right off the bat for by right ADU development. And in discussions with the staff and with town council, there was no suggestion that the by right setbacks would unreasonably restrict ADU development. Nevertheless, the department would go a lot further with special permits. It would reduce side yard setbacks to as little as 6 feet in many, many districts. And in our view, 6 feet may be adequate for a garden shed or a tool shed, but it's not adequate for an occupied dwelling with all of its activity, sound, light, and impacts on privacy. And you can see that 6-foot setback on the left hand under the department's proposal, ranging up to S10 districts. The department would reduce rear yard setbacks even more drastically by special permit, from 30 feet to 7.5 feet in most districts, from 40 feet to 7.5 districts, and from 50 feet to 10 feet in our very largest half-acre and full-acre districts. The substitute motion proposes to start with a more modest special permit reductions as shown on the table. 7.5 feet in the smallest districts, 10 feet in the other districts for side yard setbacks, and between 10 and 20 feet for rear yard setbacks. The more drastic departmental setback reductions, we feel, do not provide adequate abutter protection. They're not required under the Affordable Homes Act, and they may well not be acceptable to town meeting for either the smallest districts or the largest districts. And as noted, I just learned from Kara that they have accepted our suggestion that section 5.43 not apply to further setback reductions. We have some other differences. The substitute motion proposes some additional restrictions and protections not included in the department's motion. When an abutter-facing facade is closer than 10 feet to an abutting property line, its length under the substitute motion would be limited to 30 feet so that a developer cannot impose a 45 or 50-foot long wall on an abutting property. And to maximize privacy and minimize the transmission of sound, windows on such a facade close to a property line would have to be translucent and not operable unless there were no alternative under the building code. We also do give special protection to buildings that are historically significant or part of the neighborhood fabric, allowing garages and carriage houses that don't meet setback requirements, such as the one identified by Kara, to be converted and expanded to ADUs, even if they are within 1 foot or 3 feet or 3.5 feet of a property line, but not providing that option to small tool sheds and garden sheds. We also impose consequences if a developer demolishes without approval a building that has been deemed significant by the Preservation Commission. And we have a broader anti-gaming provision than the department initially proposed, but my understanding from Ms. Bruton is that, again, the department may be reconsidering their proposal in that regard. And gaming is a situation where a building is put up 6 feet from a property line as an accessory building, for example, and then immediately a permit is filed to convert that to an ADU. The department has attached some photos to its proposal or to its memorandum to this department. And I just want to make a few comments about those in closing. The department has cherry-picked a few lots, and then it has applied its special permit setbacks to locate potential ADUs on those lots. Let's take a quick look at what can happen with those proposals. ADUs are located closer to the abutting property rather than using available space on the developer's property. So here you see the abutting properties and available space, including, in this case, a swimming pool, rather than an ADU. On the next slide, the ADU is put in the corner near the abutting properties, despite significant open space on the developer's property. And in this situation, the ADU again is put in the corner close to an abutter's pool rather than using space on the developer's property. But there's another issue that arises. In each of these cases, the outcome using the department's setbacks and their guidelines. Just lost this. Thank you. Thank you very much. In each case, the ADU sits right on top of a tree canopy. That's true in this case. It's true in this case. And it's true in this case. And the reality of that is that with these minimal setbacks for side yard and backyards, you're going to be putting the potential ADUs close to the property line, and that in Brookline, in these cases, picked by the department itself, and in many other cases, the tree canopies are located on the boundaries between lots where the department would locate its ADUs using its setbacks. So that is another concern, frankly, that we have, and that is demonstrated by the department's own slides. And with that, let me turn this back to Roger. Thank you.
So there's one last topic that is worth finishing with you about, and it has to do with footprints. We are in sync with the department on the wisdom of limiting footprints as a matter of policy, and it's only in the detail that I just want to share with you a little perspective. For detached ADUs, both new and converted, the department proposes in the S7 and SC7 and SC and S10 districts to strictly limit the building's ground floor footprint to 530 square feet. And with a 900 square foot authorized maximum square footage, what this does is the required additional living area, if one wanted to take the maximum 900 square feet allowed, it would require the remaining 370 square feet to be put up on the second level. From a design standpoint, that makes a lot of sense. I noticed quite many months ago that Newton had done something similar, and I spoke to the planner there, and it was for the same reasons. Our substitute motion follows the same principles, but we think provides greater flexibility for the benefit of whoever's going to actually end up living in the new detached ADU. We are proposing that for the S7, the smallest lot districts, that a 600 square foot footprint be allowed, and in the S10s, a 700 square foot footprint be allowed. And I'll explain very briefly what that means. As I said, this would require, first of all, a less restrictive rule rather than requiring every last foot to be pushed upstairs and minimizing to the absolute limit the amount of the ground floor footprint. Both the department and Dick and I, for the larger lot sizes, we aren't proposing any reduction in the minimum footprint. It would be 900 square feet. The goal for both of these versions is to provide better design outcomes. I don't need the slides anymore. And especially for the livability of the first floor. We believe that the substitute motion, our substitute motion, offers a more user-friendly and yet scale-appropriate living and design options for those who will reside in these units, the ADUs, and especially for seniors, aging in place seniors, and even more so for anybody who has a handicapped member of their household. That the 600 and 700 square feet would provide a reasonable ground floor living space, a one bedroom or even possibly as many as two bedrooms, whether or not they decided to put a second level on it. In the S7 and S10 districts respectively, while it would mean a lot in terms of the additional flexibility and design and living area for especially those kinds of households, it really wouldn't make any serious difference in the amount of land that would be used or or impinging on the open space rules, et cetera. So we're just recommending a bit more flexible approach to that particular concern. It's not something that was something we started out thinking that there would be any serious differences on, but we're offering it at this point. Thank you very much.
Michael.
Jonathan Simpson is on. I'm sorry if you want to give just a brief comment.
Yep.
Do you want to hear from Jonathan?
Yeah, let's hear from Jonathan.
Sure, go ahead.
Jonathan?
There he is.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry to have jumped on late. I appreciate all the work that everyone has done. I'll echo what Dick and Kara had said. I did want to qualify one thing that Dick said in his presentation. I have been working with Roger and Dick and the planning staff. I have been asked repeatedly whether certain things in this zoning amendment would be considered unreasonable. And while Dick is correct, I don't believe that what is proposed as a by right setback would be unreasonable writ large. I am fairly confident that there will be situations where the town's if we have a by right setback of that size, particularly that there will be situations where we will be likely be situations where we will be found to be unreasonably regulating ADUs. But the critical thing here is that those will be individual situations. A landowner will will look at his property, say, I can't build an ADU, or I can't, the ADU I would be forced to build using these by right setbacks is completely unworkable for me, and will, when their building permit to build the ADU where they want is denied, they'll challenge it. And we will have to defend that regulation. And I think there will be circumstances where we will not be able to successfully defend the regulations in their current in the current zoning amendment, particularly if we are attempting to demonstrate that the by right setbacks are reasonable. That's one of the reasons why the planning department and I were proposing setback relief to the extent that we were proposing it, was because we think it will be able to channel what will end up being otherwise be legal challenges into the special permit process. And that will give neighbors the ability to weigh in. It will give the ZBA a certain amount of discretion to condition the relief requested. It will let everyone sort of work together and try to find a better solution for the neighborhood. Whereas if you have by right setbacks and only allow a small amount of relief via special permit, my concern would be that you will be inducing many people who want to build ADUs to simply challenge the regulations in court. However, like I said, that won't happen in all circumstances, and I certainly don't. I think we'd be able to successfully defend a lot of those, but it is a real concern if a ADU is a challenge is brought and our regulation for a particular lot is successful, that ADU will be able to be built right up against the property line if that's what the landowner wants. There's no fallback regulation if our regulations are found to be unreasonable. So I think that's really why we were being as flexible as we were with the special permit relief. And so I do want to make it clear to everyone now that I do think that those by right setbacks, particularly in the rear yard, requiring 15 feet in some circumstances, are going to be found unreasonable in some circumstances.
Okay, Mike.
So thank you. So thank you, Jonathan. That's helpful. The presentations were very helpful. I have a couple of sort of overriding comments. One is, I know that we need the support of 2/3 of town meeting. We also need to have conformance to state law, and that may sound familiar from the Harvard Street discussion. So listen very carefully what Jonathan says. The other, a couple of other sort of override comments. Dick expressed the thought that developers or investors might get involved in buying single family homes and building an ADU, and that would be the case no matter what the setbacks are realistically. I mean, if that's the consequence of going to ADUs, then it doesn't matter what we do in terms of this particular warrant article. And I think that realistically, most of what we're going to see is conversion of existing garages, existing structures. There are a lot of large single-family homes that have garages set in their backyards, and wherever they are, they're going to be eligible for conversion. But I do have a couple of questions for Kara in particular. What's any sense of the impact on the number of eligible lots from if the more cautious setbacks are adopted as opposed to the more liberal ones?
No, is the short answer. I don't have that.
Okay.
That if we're talking about detached ADUs, there's a certain minimum depth that people are going to want to bother with.
Right.
And when you combine that with the distance to the principal structure and the rear setback, as we were doing these drawings, we were looking for the worst case scenario. And there are many times where that front to back piece with how the structure was sited, 100 years ago is already kind of in the middle or towards the back. But we haven't done an analysis of every single
Okay.
lot.
All right, fair enough. It's kind of a tough thing to ask even. I do have, based on the drawings that you have, and for both of you, why not, instead of requiring a certain level of setback, why not change to switch to the nearest distance from structures on an adjacent lot? In that situation, you could guard against somebody putting a building even 7.5 feet from the adjacent house when they have, when they have some additional space to put the structure.
I think Jonathan Simpson should answer that, because we talked a lot about like what would happen if the side abutter agree, if the neighbors agree that the outcome is good, shouldn't we have flexibility for that?
Yeah.
Jonathan, do you want to talk about existing conditions?
Mike, I also think I raised that maybe a month ago, and it's out of scope of the article. It's an expansion of the article.
Okay, I can't speak to that.
I checked.
I'm sure that's what you heard. I wasn't aware of that.
That's what I was saying.
And there's nothing, if that's the case, then there's not much we can do about that. But just the same as an academic question. Yeah.
I think I'm not sure. So you're asking if we switched metrics, and rather than use setbacks, we sort of tried to measure it from the distance of a neighboring building,
Yes.
neighboring structures. I think that is it becomes. I think it's really only better in theory, frankly, because one of the things that I think Dick mentioned in his memo, there was the potential issue of kind of an arms race, so to speak, of someone builds a structure on their property, taking advantage of the fact you haven't built one on yours, and then your ability to build your structure is now impacted because of what your neighbor has done, which isn't really the way zoning is allowed to work. It's supposed to be uniform, so you can't have a lot that is now treated differently because of what's happened on something else, some other person's lot.
Okay. All right. Appreciate the answer. Thank you.
I just have a quick related question. Did you look at distances from an existing structure? So as opposed to a structure on an abutting property being within a certain distance of the main structure, as opposed to related to setbacks?
That we did. I mean, there's a 6-foot minimum from the principal structure. Other than that, we didn't we didn't think it was necessary to expand that any further. essentially as you probably would imagine, and this is one of the things that I think Dick and Roger have been very vigilant against, is it is a natural inclination to move these structures as necessary to preserve as much of your uninterrupted space as you can. So I don't think there's really it would be, I would not really even know how that metric we would want it to work in terms of all the interests we have going on today.
How does the 6-foot minimum work with attached ADUs?
It doesn't. It's only for detached. Attached ADUs are attached to the principal structure.
Right. And my other question there, we've talked a lot about exterior restrictions. Are there any interior restrictions? So can an ADU have an interior connection to the main structure?
It can. You have to allow the interior connect. It can share an atrium, but it needs to be a separate unit. I think that if a ADU was proposed that was, had a opening into the main structure, I think the building department would legitimately question whether it could accurately be called an ADU. But I think in most cases for attached ADUs, it's more flexible in most of the cases. If you want to just expand your principal dwelling, you would just do that. You wouldn't build an ADU and try to get more space that way.
Well, I'm just wondering for those who might want the future flexibility.
I'm not sure. That's a very good question. I think they have to have a separate entrance. Whether you could have and also have a door between the units, I genuinely don't know. You probably could, but that would be a question for the building department.
All right.
If I might, the Affordable Homes Act defines an accessory dwelling unit to be a dwelling unit that maintains a separate entrance either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling sufficient to meet the requirements of the state building code. So it remits you to the state building code, but it does allow that entrance to be internal to the building.
And then one other question I have, are there still differences between these two versions regarding a second ADU on the same parcel?
That issue has been deferred, and we have both agreed to that.
Yeah.
Paul, if you have
Yep. I want to ask Tiffany to put an image up on, I have a couple images I'd like to walk through. I think a picture's worth 1,000 words here with respect to distances. Tiffany, if you could scroll through and maybe just to provide context, that it's the picture with the that shows the front of the property. There's cars. So what I'm showing you is, and Tiffany's struggling with the images I sent. So this is,
I was just scrolling through them.
what's that? You can just scroll through. Well, so this is Ivy Street. Yeah, leave that picture. It's just not showing on the screen up here. See? Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is Ivy Street. This is in my neighborhood. I'm very familiar with it. This was a property that was purchased by a developer. It's a single family home. And you can't, there's another picture, Tiffany, if you can get the front of the building, they added this accessory building, and it's actually a garage, and above it is living spaces. But the reason why, there you go, that's the one. So you can see that at the bottom of the driveway, that blue in the back. So this is about a 22.5, I think it's actually 23 feet high. This is from the front of the building. And then if you go to the rear, one of the rear pictures, you'll just see that the structure, as I said, is a garage in the bottom, but it could easily be converted to an ADU in the bottom. Living space and above, it's meant to be like an au pair type of situation. The developer's going to be selling the home. And this is 15 feet from the property line. So on the left there is another building. That's a dwelling unit on the left. And on the right is the new building that's been constructed. So this is actually an example that the planning department used as what could be potentially be an ADU. And it just shows how big the massing is of a 22-foot high structure. And this is 15 feet from the property line. If you could go to maybe the next picture that just shows a little bit of a distance in the back. There is a second floor to it, second level with that picture right there. You can see the green area. That will actually be windows. And again, it's 15 feet from the property line, but those are going to be overlooking into the structure that's to the left, which is a home. And I just wanted to share that because it's hard when you're seeing these boxes on drawings. It's very, very difficult to understand exactly what you're talking about. 22 feet high, 15 feet from the property line is a looming structure over your property. It really is. And so for me, this, in line with maybe what Mike had said a little bit, this ultimately comes down for me. I think the biggest issue is the setbacks. And I think I've participated and listened in on just about every public hearing on this, and found the land use subcommittee. I think they've met twice on this, really informative. And I think the setback is going to be the thing that gets us to 2/3 or not. And my sense is that the setbacks that are being proposed by the motion with Dick and Roger has a much better chance of achieving a 2/3 threshold. I understand what Jonathan Simpson is saying is that might result in some challenges, but let's put something in place, and if it gets challenged, we can deal with that. And if we need to make adjustments going forward, but I don't want to anticipate too much that we're going to be challenged, and therefore we should be overly permissive. So again, I'm just like the MBTA Communities Act. I'm hyper focused on getting to a 2/3 vote. And I think we heard, was it Fran Perler or Linda Pelkey got on and said that she was supportive of Roger and Dick's version. And I think she actually said she would support it. So I'm thinking 2/3. I am really grateful for the work that the planning department has done. Kara said they've worked dozens and dozens of meetings and hours. They really have in doing that, and I appreciate it. And I do think, though, it would be very helpful for us tonight because we meet again next Tuesday, but advisory meets after Wednesday. So next Wednesday, I think we need to whittle this down to one article and make a recommendation on one article so that then AC can then move forward. If there's two articles that land use subcommittee is going to have to deal with and adjudicate, I think that would be unfortunate. It would be good for us to give them some direction.
Jonathan?
I just want to flag something. This is sort of, frankly, breaking news for someone in my position. And I just want to make sure the board has all the information. Speaking with Margaret Hurley of the Attorney General's office today, while I did not give her a draft of the actual zoning, she expressed thoughts that a revision of our ADU bylaw could potentially pass with a 50% quantum of vote rather than a 2/3. Again, this is the devil's in the details, but I just wanted to make sure the board had all the information that I did. It was a nice thing to hear. I certainly appreciate Paul's efforts at building consensus no matter what, but I did want to make sure you knew what I knew.
And is she going to put that in writing?
She has already, but the big thing is we haven't sent her a draft yet, so her word's not right.
Oh, I would.
Seen it, but she's ruled.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It'd be very nice. This is not the kind of warrant article I want to see passed by 51%. This is the kind of thing that needs broad support.
Very fair point.
But I do have a question. Jonathan explained the basis for trying to insulate ourselves from a situation in which a property owner challenges and then can build right up to the property line. And I wonder, either Dick or Roger, if you could comment on the rationale and whether you think that what you're proposing would withstand that sort of challenge.
you want to take that?
Or at least take a scientific wild ass guess at it, Dick being the attorney.
I've retired as a lawyer. But I would say that if you look at the and it was the table that was up before, the difference between the special permit distances under the department's version and under our version are 1.5 feet with respect to side yard setbacks in the very smallest zones, 4 feet in the S10 zones, which are 10,000 square feet or more. And I would not think that a challenge would be successful there with a 10-foot setback that they could say, well, I could do it with 6 feet, but I can't do it with 10 feet.
Yeah.
Once you're in a 10,000 square foot and larger lot. And as I said, in the very smallest zones, the difference is only 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
With regard to rear yard setbacks, in the very smallest zones, it's a 2.5-foot distance going up through the S10 zones. So I think the argument that you have to go with or you should go, or you'd be advised to go with the department's version because that would forestall litigation, I think is not persuasive to me.
Okay.
And you know, the impacts in terms of setbacks become greater as you get to the half-acre and full-acre districts. I'm just not persuaded by the argument that that department versus substitute motion would be get out of jail free card with respect to litigation.
Okay, thanks.
May I add to that briefly?
Yes.
I think everybody agrees that none of us want to have a raft of legal challenges and have the town in court for any of this. On the other hand, this is a very short window, and most homeowners are not going to really grasp the extent of what is being authorized here. And we are going to watch this very closely. The department will, town council will, I think a lot of people. And if there were to be even a small number of cases that got to anybody's attention that looked like they had merit and that something we had passed might deserve a second look, I think all of us, you know, we're thinking this is the first bite. Let's not scare everybody away. And we can come back as we have in the past with something that fits. If there's a pattern, we would fix it before it would be allowed to get, you know, into a big defensive posture on multiple cases in litigation. So there's a fix here. And I think, Paul, you mentioned that as well.
May I add one other point, just speculating here? If we start with the larger setbacks as proposed in the substitute motion, I think it'll be easier to go to the smaller setbacks if it turns out that there is a lot of litigation that is necessary, though I don't really foresee that happening. That under housing choice could well require only a 51% vote. Going from a small setback of 6 feet to a large setback, if people are up in arms about what's happening because of the 6-foot setback, would almost certainly require a 2/3 vote. And we might well be stuck with those 6-foot setbacks, even though a majority of town meeting and a majority of people in town found them unpalatable.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Thank you very much. So I hope this is a helpful note to add to the discussion. I want to sort of get down to what it's like, what it's going to be like in the minds of a lot of people who perhaps are in a position when we adopt an ADU law of thinking about having an ADU in their on their property, or thinking about what would it mean to me to have, if my neighbor had an ADU on their property, developed an ADU on their property. And, you know, I'm speaking from a little bit of experience of living in a single family neighborhood where over time, there have been instances where a neighboring lot was subdivided and a house was built. And then that happened again and a different situation arose at a different location with a garage that was converted to a combination garage and dwelling unit. The mental processes that people tend to go through are something like, wow, I'm not sure I want to do an ADU, but I'm pretty sure if I do an ADU, I don't want it to create friction with my neighbor. So I better think carefully about how close it comes to the lot line and the neighbor's property. And if I can build it in a way that is not too intrusive, that's probably the preferred way of doing it. And, to put the shoe on the other foot, if you're contemplating the possibility that your neighbor's going to build an ADU, the one outcome that you won't be all that thrilled with is if it comes, as close as possible up to the lot line, when in fact that neighbor could have built it or could have located it somewhere on their own property that is at that kind of a distance from their own property, but chose to locate it where it intrudes into the neighbor's property, just in terms of, hovering over the neighbor's space and coming very close in terms of what might be an invasion of privacy, considered that by some people. So I think that a lot of people at town meeting who think like that, and I think there's going to be quite a few, are going to be inclined towards the Roger Blood and Dick Benka version of how to do this. And so I think Paul's right as to the version that's likely to do better in terms of the votes it gets at town meeting. But I also think Paul's right on the substance of this, that we want to do this in a way that doesn't end up creating a lot of friction in a lot of neighborhoods. And I think we have a way of doing it, but it's more as Roger and Dick have laid out, and less as the planning board has laid out.
Paul? Okay. Can I ask Kara, you're hearing, what the board is saying. Last week, we asked you to go back and see if you can work out your differences. You have just a few differences left. Is there any way that we can come out of here with one warrant article?
Yes, that would be you all giving us advice tonight. I would love about setbacks. I mean, if we can just move through what your direction is, that would be great.
Mike?
I would support a motion to adopt the changes recommended in setbacks by the amendment.
Okay, the question is the department going to adopt those? And I want to make sure that you come out of this with one warrant article as opposed to your warrant article and an amendment.
Well, again, we won't move an article that you don't want us to move, right?
Right.
Okay,
So,
right.
If you tell us move the substitute, or if you tell us take the setbacks and then keep everything else in place, we can do either of those things.
Okay.
But it's ultimately the planning department submits it, but you move it. So you tell us what you want to move and we'll move it, and you move it rather.
Okay. I guess, Paul?
Yeah, I want to suggest first, let's make sure that we put things into proper context. We have two versions, but it is their work, right? They collaborated together to come out with this outcome. And the differences are really pretty minor right now, right? It's setbacks, and there's a little bit of, I think, a tweak on the window thing if it's too close to the lot line. So we have to realize they're 98% there, that they did that together. And I think that they should be commended for that. No, I don't. But yeah. And so what I would suggest is, instead of saying, I don't want to throw it back to them and say, go see if you can work out these differences again. I'd actually like to vote tonight and support, one version over the other, because they're so close. And I'm inclined to move favorable action on the version that Roger and Dick have brought forward. And if the board supports that, then that would be that would be the version that we're bringing forward.
That can be our motion. I just want to make sure that it's not going to create and maybe this is irrelevant, but I just want to make sure the planning department is going to be comfortable doing that. That what I consider sort of minor issues.
Yes, absolutely.
Are not, going to be a sort of stone in your craw, whatever.
No,
Okay.
this
So,
is a
so
town meeting process. It'll be fine.
Okay. So let's move warrant Article 15 as amended by the Dick Benka and Roger Blood proposal. That's sufficient language? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Michael Sandman.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Croman.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, so we got a deal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great work.
We have
Oh.
one more item, and that is whether anyone wants to make a public comment now that we're at the end of the meeting. Tiffany, is anyone out there?
No, it doesn't look like anyone's raising their hand
Okay,
to speak in the room or online.
okay. So that is the end of our agenda, and therefore the meeting is hereby ended. Thank you.
Thank you.